Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Coaching the Bible. This is episode 203, season 4, episode 43, our portion of the week, the first portion in the fifth book of Moses, the book known as Deuteronomy, the portion known as Devarim or Devarim, depending on your accent and where you're located. This week's topic is cause and effect. On cause and effect. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a good week. It's an eventful week in a lot of places in the world. Certainly was an eventful week here. A lot of angst, a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, a lot of tension in the air around here in Israel, and it's not good tension. It's not something that I think anybody really wants to be a part of or has to deal with on a regular and day-to-day basis. But that is the fact of reality where we live and what is going on around us. Sort of this foreboding sense of doom on some level, this sense of, is it going to happen? If it's going to happen, let it happen already. Let's get at this. Let's do what we have to do. It's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be bad, whatever, all those things. But that's where we are at the moment, and we are just a few days short of the fast known as the 9th of Av. Tisha B'Av is commemorating and remembering the destruction and mourning the destruction of the temples in Jerusalem. And it is the saddest day on the Jewish calendar. This year only sadder by virtue of just everything that's gone on this year. And I'm not sure exactly how it's going to go down, but I'm certain it's going to be harder than it has been in the last couple of years. I'll let you know about that next week. Okay, our win of the week this week is the network, my network, network of colleagues and friends and support. I had some questions, some issues on something that I was working on, a product that I'm trying to build and to create, and just simply reached out to the network of people that I've worked with over the last couple of years, people I've met over the last number of years, and amazingly, I shouldn't be surprised, but amazingly, everybody was willing to pitch in and help out. Jump on a call, have a meeting, talk it through. And it's really gratifying and really appreciated, obviously. So that's really good to know. And as it progresses and as perhaps this product or other things or programs grow, there'll be more opportunities to interact and to benefit from and give benefit to everyone in that sort of global network of mine that I'm blessed to have. That's a good win of the week. The learning of the week is simply about staying intentional and being mindful and present in every single moment. For those who listen, who are sort of outside of the religious Jewish community, this is going to be sort of inside baseball for just a second. One of the things that is customary in the Ashkenazic Jewry community during this period of time leading up to this fast is that for the period of time from the onset of the new moon, the new month, the month of Av, through the fast itself, we don't partake of meat or wine. And so, we're fumbling around for other things to eat, but no meat, no wine. In the Sephardi community, that's not the case, but let's not get too inside the baseball on that. Anyway, but on the Sabbath, you are allowed to partake of those things. And so as you're preparing on Friday for the Sabbath, it has been my custom to taste some of the things that we're preparing. And so I did the same thing today. And so I can tell you two things, good news and bad news. Good news, the London Borough that we're having is excellent. The bad news is I tasted it on Friday when I really wasn't supposed to. And so I felt really bad about that. And it's not the first time. So that's sort of the learning about staying intentional, staying focused, and really being mindful of just everything that's going on around you, really at all times. We are an exceptionally intentional and mindfully present people, and I sort of just dropped the ball on that one. Okay, cause and effect. Diving right into that. So there's a great quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson. We'll get another quote from him at the end of today's podcast, which is this: cause and effect are two sides of one fact. We have to sort of understand what that means and perhaps just really delve into what cause and effect are and why it's important in general to have that. And here's just one other great quote that I saw that I want to share from Michael J. Fox. Everything is cause and effect. If you don't move, nothing will move with you, and nothing will move toward you. So everything is cause and effect. Let's sort of understand what that means. And as we're sort of trying to be good leaders and better leaders and change makers in our homes, in our communities, in our lives, in our workplaces, this thing about getting cause and effect right and trying to get it right as often as possible will be transformational in your leadership ability. Getting it wrong, misdiagnosing the cause, will cost you money, time, effort, angst, stress, frustration, pressure, all those things, and you'll have to start over ultimately. So what we're going to try to do here is to try to get to a practical framework on cause and effect, and we're going to sort of explore that through initially something called root cause analysis, which just the name itself should be pretty clear what that is. And we're going to jump off to this conversation in chapter 1, verse 37 of Deuteronomy. And here at the beginning of the 5th book, Moses is in the last weeks of his life. He is speaking openly and freely to the people. He's going to speak for an extended period of time. It's a very long speech. And he's recounting facts, and he's recounting stories, and he's recounting moments. And he's not doing it in the same way that it's spelled out in the first 4 books of the 5 books of Moses, but rather he is weaving a version of the narrative. And he's picking up on certain pieces of the story and leaving out other pieces of the story. And here in verse 37, after he's just described the sin of the spies, which we talked about multiple times in Coaching the Bible, he then connects his own punishment, his own demise in the desert, his own punishment of not being able to enter the land by saying the following: "The Lord was angry with me also because of you, saying, 'You shall not go in there.'" The implication for a lot of the commentaries is that Moses is connecting his punishment to the story of the spies. Now, Moses' punishment comes in a different time, in a different place, for a different thing, on having hit the rock as opposed to speaking to the rock. We don't have to get into that now, but that is not obvious that it's connected to the sin of the spies. Yet it seems that Moses is connecting those two things together. You could read the verse differently and simply just say that, just like you're not going in, I'm not going in, and leave it at that. That's a simple way, and that's sort of Moses being sort of empathetic to the circumstance and the situation. But a lot of the commentaries go much further. Moses is connecting them. Malbim commentary we mentioned way back early on in Coaching the Bible, Rabbi 𝗏𝗏𝗏 𝗂𝘃 Berlin, known as the 𝗏𝘁𝗍, also, both of them in their commentaries directly talk about the idea that Moses is connecting what happened to him to what happened to them. And the simplest way to understand that is by virtue of the fact that the people are not going in, because they sinned with the spies, they ultimately spent many, many years in the desert, which allowed for an opportunity in a moment to come up where Moses then hit the rock instead of speaking to the rock. And so he is connecting cause and effect right there, right? And so his action is the reaction or response, or is a resultant of, is an effect of the fact that they are not going into the land. He's not going into the land because they're not going into the land, and they're related to each other. And so it's important, first and foremost, to appreciate that he is in seemingly connecting cause and effect here, and it's important to be in this space to reflect on the different things that are going on and to be self-reflective, to be sharing perspective in this moment before his demise or his passing. But it's interesting to sort of appreciate the sort of causal relationship that Moses is bringing in here. We don't have to go further than that in this story. But to take another example, in the Talmud, Tractate Yoma, page 9, side B, there's a discussion there as to the reasons as to why the temples were destroyed. What were the reasons? The idea here is, in understanding the reasons, is that if we can appreciate what caused it, the effect was the destruction of the temple, the exile of the people. If we can appreciate the cause, then we can go back and fix it, right? We can do what we'll call root cause analysis. We'll talk about more of that in just a second. And then once we appreciate what the root causes are, we can establish structures, programs, behaviors, tasks, activities, whatever that may be, to not just avoid it, but uproot the initial cause so that it never happens again. It's an interesting conversation there as to what the reasons are. We don't have to go into it, but it's important to appreciate an understanding of, again, the idea of cause and effect. It's everywhere and it's around us all the time. The question becomes whether or not we get it right or we get it wrong. And so we have to dive into that, because otherwise we get nowhere. So here is root cause analysis. Root cause analysis is simply, it's a methodology that helps leaders identify fundamental reasons for a problem rather than merely addressing its symptoms. We can talk about causation versus correlation. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But it's really important that we get to root cause. It comes up actually because I don't want to be political, but let's be political for just a second here. One of the things that has come up in the course of the presidential election cycle that's going on now was the vice president's role in the border. And whereas many have contended that she was the border czar and that she was responsible for everything happening at the border, her team had gotten much more nuanced and talked about the idea that all her role was simply understanding the root causes of migration. Why is it that people are migrating from Central and South America to the United States, and then dealing with root cause solutions as a result, right? So that's root cause analysis. Here, Moses is trying to get to the root cause a little bit as to what happened to him, but more he's going on a much bigger and wider sort of presentation. The stories in the Talmud are going at the root cause. What's the root cause for the destruction of the temple? Let's get that right. Let's understand that, because then we can problem solve for the future. We can problem prevent. We can be preemptive in our actions in the future, as opposed to being, mistakenly focused on the wrong things. We can be more efficient in cost savings, obviously, by getting to root cause analysis, because then we're focused on the right things as opposed to the wrong things. When you appreciate what the bottlenecks are and what they aren't, where the root issues are and where they aren't, and deal with them even when it's uncomfortable, we can improve, we can get better, we can solve, become more efficient, more effective, maximize and optimize our different opportunities. And so we have to sort of appreciate how that works. So root cause analysis is very much about getting sort of wide and systemic, appreciating the different flows and the different progressions in the work that we're doing. It's very much a data-driven analysis kind of approach, really getting the facts and the details and the numbers and looking at the full swath of the picture. Otherwise, we simply miss steps, and we don't want to miss the steps in there. Now, how does one go about root cause analysis? So one great tool, I've talked about it in a different context, is the 5 why concept. I have the 7 why concept. But basically is repeating the question of why. Every time someone explains something, why did this happen? Boom, they give you a reason. Well, why did that happen? And then why did that happen? And why is that important? And why is that part of this process here, right? It's very much like, the worst version of this is a little kid asking you over and over and over again, why? And it's annoying, and it can be, maddening to some degree, but the concept is actually rather effective. And so it's an approach here, getting to the base why, the last rung of that ladder, and at that point you've hit root cause. Really important. Okay, next is a different approach, which is the Pareto analysis. Pareto analysis is the 80-20 rule, and understanding here what we're trying to do is that the idea that perhaps 80% of the problems, this is the application here, 80% of the problems are caused by 20%, right? So basically, the resultant 80% of the problems are caused by 20% of the causes, and an ability to identify those things and uproot some of those 20. If we can figure out what the cause, those 20% causes are, we'll have solved 80% of our problems. And so that's a really good way to going about doing that. And so obviously we're going to try to get to root cause analysis in every part of our lives, because we want to solve for X. We want to be in positions where we're operating from an optimal position and succeeding at a high level, and not continually sort of beating ourselves up and banging our heads against the wall with the same problems, the same, in this context, the same effects every single time. And so we need to, ground our analysis in the data. We need to create spaces of inquiry and curiosity so that people can go at this in a full-fledged picture approach. We need to get cross-functional on the teams with diversity, getting a lot of different kinds of voices and a lot of different kinds of minds into the situation so that we can therefore get to the right root causes in our situation. Now, what's really important to appreciate here is that in doing root cause analysis and getting to cause and effect, that we don't get lost in causation versus correlation. And those things are not the same thing. So let's appreciate this. Causation or causation is a direct link where one action leads to an effect. And so you can see trigger, you can see effect. You can see start, you can see finish. And those two things, you can draw the line between that flow from A to B. Important. Correlation is not the same thing. Correlation is about relationships, but it doesn't mean that one thing causes another. So here's a brutal but simple example. Ice cream sales and drowning incidents. Ice cream sales and drowning incidents both increase when? In the summer. But there is no causational relationship between the increase in ice cream sales and the increase in drowning incidents at the same time. They are correlated, but they are not causal one to the other, unless it is the fact that somebody is drowning other people with a lot of ice cream. But the reality is that the ultimate cause is the increase in warm weather, right? The real cause as to why does more ice cream get sold and why do more people drown, right? One of the main reasons is that in the summertime, more ice cream is sold because it's hot outside. It's a nice treat in the heat. And two, more people are around the water, around pools, around oceans, around rivers, around lakes. And so they're, simply by virtue of the numbers, more people are going to be in positions where there potentially could be drownings. To take it to a more serious note, for many years I mentioned here multiple times I taught this course on the Middle East conflict. And one of the things that I taught my students was very much about root cause analysis and appreciating causation versus correlation, cause and effect, in what is that caused the Middle East conflict, right? Was it the occupation, as an example, was it the occupation that was first, which caused the terror? So terror is the effect that came out of occupation, or is it flipped, and that terror is the cause that led to an occupation later on? Or is it neither, and it's simply just correlative, but not actually causal one to the next? You can get into everything like that. A great example in the world right now would be like the opioid crisis in America is a great example. Again, to stay out of the politics, it's a national tragedy. It's devastating. The numbers are insane as to how many people find themselves in a position of addiction, injury, death in the United States, how many families are impacted and affected by it. And when government and community is trying to deal with this crisis, one has to appreciate as to what is causing the crisis and what is the effect of the crisis, right? So is it one thing? Is it multiple things? Imagine it's multiple things. It's not so simple. I know people like to have sort of an Occam razor here and simplify it down as much as possible, but simplification can be a problem here as well. And so maybe it's a mix of causes that lead to the effect, right? So you can go through the different examples and explanations as to why there is a crisis, an opioid crisis in America. Maybe it's prescription related in terms of how prescriptions are given out. Maybe it's socioeconomic issues. Maybe it's healthcare issues. And the effect is a heavy increase in drug use and death by virtue of those systemic failures. So simply just focus on stopping people from dying after they've already become addicted is treating the effect rather than treating the systemic problem that exists and therefore not getting it right. And so it's really important to appreciate, again, how that root cause analysis can get to possibilities, not actual, but possibilities of solutions that might come up in these situations. Now, why do people get it wrong? People often get it wrong. People often get cause and effect wrong for one reason, cognitive bias. So confirmation bias is simply just the idea that we're always looking to confirm what it is that we always believe. We're trying to find evidence for the things that we already believe, and by virtue of that, in these cause-effect relationships, we might zoom on a specific aspect of it because it confirms what we already believe, rather than actually unpacking it in full and getting to the heart of what's at issue here, even if it means that we have to go back on or reverse out of biases that we hold at the moment. Sometimes we oversimplify. So we simply just zoom in on one specific thing. You know, like they talk about World War I, is the assassination is the reason that World War I started. That may be a factor into the reason why World War I started, but I don't think that's the only reason World War I started. You have to not oversimplify the situations and go deep. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't certain circumstances where when you look at something and you do the root cause analysis, that you find that the block is simply that the stop sign was put in the wrong part of the street, to oversimplify it. But really appreciate that that's true, but at the same time, there's usually much more going on that's causal here that leads to the effects that you see. And so we have to then sort of find ourselves in real-world situations. There are so many real-world situations in the world itself that have already existed, that you've seen, that you've perhaps been around, that you've maybe participated in some way, or maybe not. But there are some global ones that are worth analysis in the larger perspective. Just as an example, the one famous one that actually turned out really well was the Toyota production system. Toyota faced just massive inefficiencies in the way in which they produced their vehicles. And so it led to a lot of waste, led to quality issues. And so they then developed something called the lean manufacturing approach, which really focused on reducing waste and improving quality through continuous improvement, employee empowerment, and it basically revolutionized production for them, but not just for them, for everybody that leaned into lean manufacturing as a way. So you might have simply just focused on, they just got better technology, and that was, what led to their greater success, but not appreciating the procedural change that led to that success and those efficiencies would be you missing the forest for the trees. So that's just simply one example. So I want to just share with you then here at the end a brief framework. Like I always like to do is give you a really good brief framework for diagnosing cause and effect. And this one's called the ACE framework. ACE stands for Analyze, Collaborate, Execute. I'm just using different synonyms for a lot of the words that we've talked about before in other places and other frameworks. But the ability to have the right framework in place for something like this just allows you to get at it faster and allows you to sort of solve for X a lot faster. So to analyze, collaborate, and execute, you want to simply just do the deep dive and appreciate what's going on, right? Get the data, get really clear as to what the problem actually is, be precise in the language that you use around the data and around the problems, the causes, the issues at play, because imprecision or ambiguity is going to lead you to a lot of frustration. That's one. Number two is the collaboration, as I mentioned before, getting the team together, harnessing a lot of really smart people in the room to get a large range of potential causes, not even eliminating any of them, but simply just getting at all of them, and then sort of whittling down from the many to the few to the ones that are actually the causes that lead to the effect, that lead to the problem, or the reverse, the causes that lead to the success. We should say that too. That's certainly true also, because maybe then we want to replicate. So again, analyze, collaborate, execute. Get the systems then in place that allow you to execute at a very high level very quickly. Get yourself into a position where you can very sort of quickly move yourself from being in a situation where it's cause-effect negative to a cause-effect net positive for what it is that you're trying to do. And then obviously you're going to monitor and evaluate and iterate over time. So this very simple framework structure process, I think, really gets you there pretty quickly. The truth is, as you go forward into the future, a lot of the tech is going to be able to do this for you. The ability to have AI and machine learning and to sort of see a lot of data in front of you and to really analyze a lot of material, all of the world's knowledge at your fingertips, and then be predictive on some level will help you and help all of us avoid many of the situations that we find ourselves in, and then obviously really lead us to other ones which we don't even know about. And so that is for us a brief understanding of cause and effect, a little bit about root cause analysis, and as always to end with a great quote. Another quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson, which is this: "Shallow men believe in luck or in circumstance. Strong men believe in cause and effect." That is Coaching the Bible for this week. Those of you fasting this week, I wish you a meaningful and easy fast. May it be the last time we have to do this. I mean, next year be a day, which we come to this day and it actually be a holiday and a celebration rather than a day of mourning, a day of commemoration, a day of sadness. Wishing you all a good week, health, happiness, and a great day ahead.